tell me about when you first thought Sam might have had Aspergers?
Well, the first indication came from his Year 1 teacher and a teacher aide who had quite a bit of experience with working with kids with Aspergers, and they had us in for a meeting and began to speak to us about some of the behaviours that they saw Sam exhibiting. They believed that Sam was quite stressed in that classroom, and he was sitting doing wheelie things, 360s on the carpet and whatever, rather than listening to the story being read. And I guess that was the first indication. We weren't too keen on I certainly wasn't too keen on their diagnosis at that point, but that was the first indication for us and the beginning of the journey.
Yes. And how long did it take you then to get him seen by a specialist, or to actually get it officially diagnosed, or whatever? What is that procedure anyway?
It took us a while, quite a few years actually, from that point where we knew that there was something different, to get our heads around the whole situation. Because what we see at home is very different to what they see at school. And so the behaviours that they were talking about our son sitting there with absolute fascination at the carpet and just like mesmerised by a thread on the carpet, that we weren't seeing that kind of behaviour. So for them to tell us that, we're kind of like going, all right, how boring were your classes? For him to be fascinated in that. So it took a while for us to get our head around. So it was grade 3.
We think it was grade 3, and we had a chat to the principal at that point about where she saw Sam, and obviously we'd been talking to teachers along the way.
Yeah.
And she said to us, well, look, he's not thriving, he's struggling a little bit, and a diagnosis would help us to get him some help. So I thought, all right, well, we really have nothing to lose. So we made an appointment with the GP first of all.
Yes.
And talked to her. She said, well, yep, there's obviously some things going on there that aren't quite normal. So things like him being literal and being really fascinated in certain subjects like trains and carpet. And then we saw a paediatrician who spoke with us and spoke with him alone, and come up with a diagnosis from there.
Yes, we'd already gone to the guidance officer, and the guidance officer had really only given us information of just how to help him concentrate or something. It wasn't particularly, it was helpful for that particular thing, but it dealt with a tiny thing, not with a whole bigger perspective. So we really needed to go to the GP. We were prepared at that point because we'd been told that depending on, so not the GP, the paediatrician, we were prepared to get like brigades leaders and other leaders in his life to actually also comment on that, because we were told that that was part of the process. And I think sometimes you are asked, but this particular paediatrician looked at him and went, I don't need the word of them, I can see what's happening. So, yeah, that was it.
What did you know about Aspergers before that time?
Not very much.
I knew some because when I was teaching I had a boy with Aspergers in my Year 4 class, and I'd done some professional development around that. But I really only had one or two examples to sort of work from. So that was about what we knew.
Mm-hmm. And that made a big difference because there is such a big difference in the spectrum that when you see someone who's lower functioning, then that our son is very high functioning in a lot of ways. So you kind of looked at him, well, he's not that. So that impacted too in our journey of accepting that there was something strange, unusual.
So what are the specific traits that he would have that fits him in that spectrum?
Where do you start?
Fixations on certain things.
At the moment it's football.
Yeah, Australian rules. There's also I don't know if this is part of his Aspergers, but he doesn't particularly enjoy reading and writing, particularly writing. He's not a big fan of writing.
Sensory, I think. So yes.
Yeah. He doesn't necessarily read people and have great people skills in the sense of being able to read where other people are at and judging how they're reacting to him. He has a fixation on the rules being followed. These are the rules. So other kids get rather upset with him because he's often the policeman in the playground. I think that's probably the...
Noises. In a classroom, he hates relief teachers because he will tell you that the kids will be noisier and that they will be disobedient. And so, like, before it's even happened, before the teachers even walk through the door, he's declared it to be a failure and it's going to be awful and overwhelming, and so he'll want to hide under his desk because that's easy to cope with than dealing with all the noise. So it's a real sensory, he gets overloaded with images, and so whether it be sound, whether it be just anything, it can be just overwhelming. So we see that. Just trying to think.
Well, I think that's probably the biggest things, yeah.
Yeah.
It plays out, frustratingly plays out for me, where he'll be telling you a story and you'll already know the end of the story. You might be able to tell him, oh yes, that's right, and that's what this happened. But he's already got in his mind what he's going to tell you, so he has to finish it. He has to tell you. And the other thing that comes out is that in lots of environments, particularly where it's a little bit unusual, a little bit exciting, he speaks every thought.
Yes,
and
every thought. Drives kids balmy. He actually relates much better to adults than peers because peers don't understand him. They don't get him. He doesn't get them. In our culture, where we say things like it's raining cats and dogs, he will go outside and he will check for the cats and dogs.
Not anymore. Or
he will stop and think and go, you're just saying that, and he has to process that whole information. Whereas we don't stop and think. He ponders on it until he's come up with a conclusion.
One time that sticks out in our mind is, in my mind, is when we were joking with our children and we suggested that we'd hang him up by his toes, and his younger sister was just fully in cacks and giggles at this thought, but he got quite upset about the prospect of being hung up by his toes.
Yes.
So how does it work with siblings? How do they understand his traits and then accommodate for it, or do they get frustrated?
He's always been that way. So they just right from the day one had to just deal with him, and they don't even realise that he's different. They know that he has special needs stuff at school, and they will kind of say why. But yet when you do sit down and talk to them, they kind of they go, oh yeah, like they get it. They've obviously just had to make differences and allowances, and so that's just a part of their world. But he's not, because we are really fortunate. He's not a violent kid. He's not an aggressive kid, and I know that other kids have got all sorts of different problems. There's a lot of things that we just don't have to deal with. He's actually a very loyal brother, and I mean very loyal. He will stand up for his sisters, and yes, I know other siblings will do that, but that is something with Sam that when he hit loyal, it is such a strong word for him that we see some real benefits to his Aspergers. It's not all negative, and that's a part of the journey, because when you find out you wonder what his future's going to hold. As a child, he never ever liked to write his name. He didn't want to pick up a pencil. If his preschool teacher hadn't taught him how to write his name in the sand, he never would have done it. So right from the beginning, there has been differences, and so you wonder what kind of a future, what kind of a job will this boy hold? But then you look at these beautiful things, this loyalty, this devotion to anyone and family, and you see it even with the way he loves his AFL. It's a devotion to it. That there's a benefit to that as well. Yeah.